And we're live! Welcome to the Bard Book Club Henry VI Part 1 discussion.
Yes.
I'm Bridget, that's Molly.
Hello.
Welcome.
Welcome. Before we discuss, should we have a sonnet?
Yes, would you like to read yours or do you want me to read mine?
I can read mine, so and then you can close us out. I'll be reading sonnet 130. My mistress' eyes are nothing like the sun. Coral is far more red than her lips red. If snow be white, why then her breasts are dun. If hairs be wires, black wires grow on her head. I have seen roses damasked, red and white, but no such roses see I in her cheeks. And in some perfumes is there more delight than in the breath that from my mistress reeks. I love to hear her speak, yet well I know that music hath a far more pleasing sound. I grant I never saw a goddess go. My mistress, when she walks, treads on the ground, and yet by heaven I think my love is rare, as any she believed with false compare.
Nice.
I thought the roses imagery and all that worked well for what we're discussing because Henry VI Part 1 takes place at the beginning of the Wars of the Roses. There's been a lot of TV shows made about the Wars of the Roses in past years, and basically it's when the war between the Tudors to see who would rule England, the Lancasters or the Yorks, that ultimately ended with Henry VIII winning. Like Henry VII, and then it became Henry VIII, and that's like Game of Thrones is based on the Wars of the Roses. But I actually didn't realize that Joan of Arc predated the Wars of the Roses. I wasn't sure when that's in history because I obviously knew who she was and what happened to her, but I didn't know logistics around it. So when when I was looking up stuff about this play and the characters to cast it, I was surprised and excited to see she was a character.
Yeah.
I was excited about it. So what did you think of the play? Because I surprisingly liked it.
Yeah, I liked it as well. It's this one and Henry V that I've liked best out of the Henry plays. I liked it quite a bit. I'm nervous because there's 2 more parts.
Yeah, where do we go from
here? I feel like we did a good job with part 1. Let's end it there.
Yeah, I get the part 1 is kind of the lead up to Henry VI ruling because it's mostly about Joan of Arc and all the other people's building up Henry VI campaign.
Yeah.
And, obviously, spoiler alert, Joan's dead by the end of the play. And so he's hardly in it. He's not in it till it's the 4th or 5th act. He doesn't come in with a lot of lines. But yeah, I thought that too. I was like, this is either going to be a really good prologue into a really good trilogy or it's going to be trash. But from what I looked up, since these 3 plays were some of the first written in the shared universe of Henry, people really liked it. So I'm hoping, because the Wars of the Roses is an interesting, really weird time in English history.
He did write this one last.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I found out when I was doing some research for the Instagram and stuff. I thought it'd be a fun fact, and it was this one was written after the other 2, and I was like, did not expect that. So maybe that means the other 2 will be good, and this was tying it all together. I don't know.
Can I tell you? So I found out some fun facts too.
Oh yeah.
So some facts about Henry VI himself. He was the only English king to be crowned King of France as well. He suffered a severe mental breakdown in August 1453.
Who hasn't?
And the sequence of Henry plays is what helped cement Shakespeare's status as a successful playwright, while he was alive. And then the Joan of Arc stuff I discovered was crazy. Her real name was either, they're not entirely sure, Jehanne d'Arc, Jehanne Tark, Jehanne Romy, or Jehanne de Forthon. Modern doctors have speculated she was schizophrenic. I think that's a little misogynist. What, a woman can't hear the voice of God? Because we don't look at the Bible and we're like, I bet Moses was schizophrenic. So I don't know if I buy that. I'm not saying, angels spoke to her, but maybe. So there were 70 charges against her, ranged from sorcery to horse theft. By 1431, they narrowed it down to 12, including wearing men's clothes and claiming God. how dare she, and claiming God contacted her. She signed a document confessing her sins so she'd face life in prison instead of execution, but she was supposedly illiterate, so historians speculate she was tricked into what she was signing, which is something that happened a lot in the Salem witch trials and like witch trials in general. If they couldn't read, they basically convinced them the paper said something like less dire, and by signing it, they'd probably like get to leave or whatever. Several days later, her guards threatened to rape her.
Great.
And like life in prison with that. So she put her men's clothes back on and said the voices had returned, as like she'd rather die than that, and was sent to the stake. And in 1434 to 1440, her brothers tried to pass off an imposter as her, saying she escaped execution as just like a way to try and like make money and get famous.
Yeah.
And supposedly Joan of Arc inspired the bob haircut that became popular again in the 30s. So there's some fun facts about Joan of Arc. Yeah, I thought all those were really interesting. So what else did you like about the play?
I thought, yeah, like you said, I didn't realize Joan of Arc was in it until like I actually like skimmed it, and then when we read it,
because they only call her Joan of Arc one time. They call her Selina Pucelle.
Yeah, and I thought that was really cool, especially because like there aren't generally. I feel like we say this every time. We're like, there's not that many women characters.
Because there aren't, and especially when they do the history plays, there aren't many women. The women don't live that long, or the women are kind of just like wives and husbands taking a back seat.
Yeah, so it was really cool that she was like actually like doing stuff and like a big part of the plot and everything.
Yeah, like she was like a war hero essentially. Well, like in real life, I looked it up. They weren't certain if she led people into active battle or not, like but I like that Shakespeare chose to be like, no, she did.
Yeah, I feel like he makes some good choices with that, like especially like with her, and then like with Lady Macbeth, kind of like defying those stereotypes.
There was definitely one part near the end when she is talking to all the spirits and is like, help me win this. And the spirits like don't talk to her back. And I was like, and she's like, oh, my power is too weak and hell is too great. I was like, so does Shakespeare think she was a witch? Like, which again, we don't know. Like, maybe, I don't know. Like, because that's the thing is, I think in that specific case, to write it off as, oh, she was probably mentally ill and didn't hear the voice of angels. If you believe in God and angels, which we do, then you and I don't think it's a stretch to assume that over the entire course of human history, some people were like spiritual enough. Because like if a priest told you that he heard the voice of angels or the voice of God, you would believe him.
Yeah.
But because she was like a poor, uneducated peasant woman,
which could be her.
Couldn't be her. Well, and people, like didn't take Shakespeare super seriously because he was a poor, uneducated person. So I like that he that in his play, she really could hear the angels, like that was confirmed. That she wasn't screwing with
a nice comparison. Also, I think it's interesting that you said that he was like kind of cemented in like British literature.
Yeah.
Like the Henrys. Which, like, I guess makes sense because, like, back then they'd be like, oh, well, this is very topical and everything.
Yeah.
Versus now, I feel like all of his other work is much more discussed.
Yeah, nobody talks about the Henrys unless they're, like, a fan of Shakespeare canon.
Unless you're, like, in a Shakespeare class or something.
Yeah, like, or they did theater in college. Because, like, whenever I talk to other people who took Shakespeare classes or have been in plays or whatever, or just studied him, they, like, know of the historical plays, but they're not like, oh, boy, Richard II, am I right? But, like, because when you talk to people who don't know Shakespeare, like I was talking to this guy on Tinder and I said, oh, we're doing Henry VI Part 1. And he was like, oh, I just Googled that. That's crazy that Shakespeare just like invented the idea of a shared universe, that he was just releasing plays that were all together. He was like, because that wouldn't happen now because theater is so inaccessible. Like it's always unheard of. Like it happens, but it's so rare to have.
It's like The Cursed Child, and that's like it.
For like Love Never Dies was a sequel. Yeah. But like a lot of times, like there's Mamma Mia where there's a sequel to the movie, but it's pretty unheard of anymore for there to be a sequel to a stage show because like who would see it? Because you'd have to have already had the money to see the first one. And the fact that theater was so accessible back then that he just made this whole universe of plays that connect is pretty interesting, I think.
Yeah. It's really cool. It's the Shakespeare.
It's the Shakespeare shared universe, the SSU.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find for when we get to dialogue. I should have marked this. Is Percy's character when we did the reading had this whole line that they give about like how Joan will be seen as a saint. Let me just Google it. Besides Joan, what characters did you like?
It's the way I forgot all of their names for
me.
They're all just so memorable.
I liked Percy's character, but I'm blanking. Let me pull up the cast list. Hold on. I still have the cast list, maybe I don't. Let's find out.
Yeah, I liked Percy's character. And then I liked I liked my characters because I just liked how they argued back and forth.
Yeah, I liked
Winchester and Gloucester, was it?
Yeah, the whole scene where everyone was arguing over which house they were gonna support. Here I have our cast list here. You were Gloucester.
Yeah.
And you were
Winchester and Gloucester arguing. I thought that was really funny.
The scenes where you were just taking hats on and off, I thought that was hilarious. Yeah, Percy was Charles, and that was really funny.
That was good.
When Mar was the character, it was God, what scene was it? It was like a woman where then Austen's character came in and the woman was like not impressed with the men going to war.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It was just there's so many of them that it was hard to keep everyone's names.
Yeah, there were just a lot of characters, and like I felt like they were all pretty good and like unique for like considering
having that many. Because a lot of times when they have that many, it's not like the other Henrys. I think Falstaff was like cool in the Henry IV Part 1, and then in Henry V is such a specific character, but you're not like when other people come on, you're not like, oh boy, great. Yeah.
Usually there's like one or two, and in this I thought they were all pretty good.
I agree. I thought they were all pretty. I think it also just flowed really well because I think if we had tried to do, because we only had 7 people this time, I think, hell yeah, because when we did like Henry IV Part 2 with only 5 people, like it was so difficult, but it was so easy to make this play flow easily. Like who was doing what, I thought it was easy to do, and it was just funny. Like. You keep talking while I find the part about Joan.
I'll move on to plot. I really thought it was interesting. You know, I don't know that much about the War of the Roses, so it was interesting to like kind of see like this lead up to it and like just to see Joan and like her story, especially because she's just so famous and everything.
Yeah, like she's such a thing just in the public consciousness. Like everyone has heard of her, but we don't actually like have many stories specifically about her. And I definitely didn't think in a play called Henry VI Part 1 she was going to be the main focus, and I thought that was really cool. I know some things about the Wars of the Roses because I think the history of monarchs is very interesting. Because it's just such a crazy concept to me that was ever how the world was run. And like the Wars of the Roses led up to Henry VIII, which led up to Mary Queen of Scots and like Elizabeth Tudor. And so like the Wars of the Roses was what basically like changed the course of like how the British monarchy was going to be run, and then inadvertently how like the rest of Britain, like Scotland, and then how France would be affected. And again, like I don't know when I thought Joan existed in history. Like it just it was the past. Like I didn't think too much when it was. So like I don't know.
I kind of thought she was earlier than that.
I think I knew she was like around the Renaissance. Like I thought of her as like a medieval figure.
I feel like I thought of her as like just after like King Arthur.
Yeah, I'm like she was, in the castle times. Like
the castle and night times.
The past when people wore armor, because I'm a scholar and I know these things. Yeah, so definitely wasn't an expert on that.
So it was cool to kind of like see that, and like I thought the plot was like interesting enough, especially like for like a Henry play
and for a play about war, where a lot of it's like war strategy.
It's hard to do war plays because it's like, even though like we're doing it on Zoom, like even doing it on a stage, it's like you're not going to show much. It's going to be like there's a war,
Well, yeah, because they're always like happening off screen because we only have so much ability to, and even if like you had like the money to show something on stage, it's still like you'd have to choreograph like stage fights and stuff, and it's like, oh, okay, like we can only do so much here.
Yeah. So I thought it was pretty interesting, especially considering like they did work with what they could around the war and everything like that. I also thought it was interesting just how, like, I don't know how Shakespeare decides how many characters he's going to have.
He needs to consolidate, I'd say.
And I just thought it was interesting because, like, there is kind of going on to the themes, like, but it's just a lot about all the houses disagreeing, which I feel like makes sense. And I feel like that is very interesting. It's almost like a reality show where you're like, who's gonna win? Who's gonna be Britain's next top house, you know?
I definitely liked how like Charles, the character of Charles at the beginning was very much like, oh, ew, we're gonna have a woman help us, like that's stupid. And then by the end was like, we will remember her as a saint, like we will, when people look back on this, they will say like, it is she who helped save us. And like he befell this horrible unjust fate, but when we look back, it is her that is talked about and her that is remembered.
Yeah,
I think that's interesting.
Especially considering like we remember her outside of the play, and it's not like that.
Yeah, like we know who she is in general, which is, I think, interesting.
Yeah. I feel like gender is also a big theme.
Oh, for sure.
Obviously, with Joan and everything like that.
I think like going along with gender, like misogyny and like fear of like feminine power, and also just like the idea that women could be more similar to men in energy, that like masculinity isn't this thing, like it's like, and gender performance too. And so the idea that
there's a bit of gender performance in all of Shakespeare's plays.
Well, yeah, obviously, but
yeah,
I definitely liked that this showed, you know, like the men who were willing to change their ideas to let a woman join and be so heavily involved, and then the men who let like their misogyny and like their fear of female power. You know, obviously they won, as is most of history.
Yeah, and I think power is another big.
Yeah, with a war play, especially, power is going to be a big one. I also think, like, I wrote down spiritual superiority, the idea that, like, not only how could this woman hear the voice of angels, but how could this poor woman hear the voice of angels? Which, like, you know,
class and everything.
Yeah, like classism and the idea of, like, you know, this is back still when the Bible was printed in Latin. So, like, poor people couldn't even probably read the Bible. It wasn't until Anne Boleyn, the second wife of Henry VIII, that the Common English Bible was printed. So the idea, you know, that this woman who theoretically, if she was literate, couldn't even, you know, even if she could read English and French, she was to say she could read Latin. So the idea that this woman who couldn't even read Latin is hearing the voice of angels. When these like rich monarchs who are in this war are not hearing the voice of angels, is the classism, and
especially considering like monarchs, like I feel like isn't their thing that like they're close to God and
they're ordained by God, divine right. They believe that they are better than everyone because God selected them. So the idea that to them, you know, which is dumb because if you
this random lady,
because if then
I feel like that also makes sense at this, like at least with the Bible, that like.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say, because it's like poor people, like Moses like was born poor and then he grew up rich in that story, but like you know,
Jesus is born to some random woman.
He's like poor people in a barn, like whether or not you believe the Bible's real, but you know these people were supposed to believe it was real, and so if they believed all these poor people in those books heard the voice of God, then And like, you know, again, it's like in the Bible, Mary's visited by an angel. Like, it's not like it was unheard of in the Bible for
women to hear it. Yeah.
And it's one of those things where it's like, they were the kind of Christians who like did not practice what they preached. They were like, oh, everyone's God's children. And then it's like, this poor woman heard the voice of God and angels. They're like, absolutely not.
Oh, man, I don't believe that.
And it's also interesting that they were like, oh, witchcraft, because like the people they were like burning for witchcraft and everything weren't like out here going like, I heard the voice of God. Like they were just like healers and shit. And like, so they were saying like, oh, she's actually hearing the voice of Satan and trying to convince us that. And I was like, as a stretch.
Supernatural episode.
Yeah, it's like that. I was just thinking that. I literally, when I learned Joan of Arc was a character in this, when I was looking up something for us to watch, I was like, she referenced in a Supernatural episode ever? Because I had thought there was I had this like fabricated memory. I had thought there was a Joan of Arc movie with Keira Knightley. No, it was not. It was a Robin Hood movie. That was like if Robin Hood had been a girl, and it was Keira Knightley. There was like a really shitty like made for TV Joan of Arc movie, so I was glad we did not choose that. But yeah I also wrote down we said political power, witchcraft, blah blah blah. Oh no, that's everything I wrote down. But yeah,
I think it's also like patriotism is a big thing as well.
Oh, for sure.
Like, I mean, that's always with anything to do with war, but like just like the idea of like fighting for your country and all of that is always a big
and
thing.
Like how far are you willing to go for a country?
Within these Henry plays, I feel like that's a big deal, especially with the whole like monarchy and like are you loyal to the monarchy and like
why would you, like how far will you go for a country that may or may not actually care about you? And so Joan's willing to go so far for this country that then at the end of the day not enough people of France, cared about her, and obviously the English hated her. And it's one of those things too where like there's just obviously so many people over the course of history, but so many women where you have to wonder if they've gotten to live like as long a life as they should have. How different would the course of history be? Because like, these powerful men wanted to keep her on as an advisor and they valued everything she said. So it's like you have to wonder like if Anne Boleyn lived, if Mary Queen of Scots lived, if like someone like Joan of Arc got to live longer, what would the world be like? Like, would it be different? But obviously the other men in power were like, ew, a woman who people are taking seriously. We're going to need to stop that right away. That's a big no. What's some fun dialogue you liked? I wrote down some things. I actually thought the dialogue was like really beautiful for a Henry.
Yeah, there were some really good lines.
My favorite one is like, it's simple, but it was just fight till the last gasp.
I had that one written first too.
Yeah, the idea of just fight till it's over. Like, don't, I love in war stories when someone is like, we'll keep fighting. Like we're like, I know it's like corny, but since I just read Harry Potter the month before, like all the scenes with Neville being like, we're going to keep fighting, that like the idea of like, and like there's just scenes in like Game of Thrones and stuff like that where even if everyone's completely outnumbered, they're like, we're still going to do it, like fight till the last gasp. What's another one you have?
My thoughts are whirled like a potter's wheel. I know not where I am nor what I do. I just thought it was like interesting because it's like there are those times when like everything's up in the air and you just gotta keep going,
Yeah, I had no one can I be severed from your side, then can yourself in twain divide. What's another one you have?
No, I am but shadow of myself. You are deceived. My substance is not here.
When a world of men could not prevail with all their oratory, yet hath a woman's kindness overruled.
Yes.
I forgot to write it down, but it was like Charles says like when they're gonna battle, him and Joan when they first meet, he says something like, come as you may, I'll never bow before a woman. And Joan says, in all my life I'll never fear a man. Like that's a paraphrase, but that's essentially what they say. What's another one you have?
Wilt thou be daunted at a woman's sight? Aye, beauty's princely majesty is such, confounds the tongue and makes the senses rough.
Good Lord, what madness rules in brain-sick men.
Oh, I have that one too.
It's a great one.
Glory is like a circle in the water, which never ceases to enlarge itself.
What was the other one I had? Oh no, I think you already read that one. Oh, yeah. But you that are polluted with your lust, stained with guiltless blood of innocence, corrupt and tainted with 1,000 vices, because you want the grace that others have. You judge it straight, a thing impossible to compass wonders, but help of devils. I love the, corrupt and stained with guilty blood of innocence, corrupt and tainted with 1,000 vices, because you want the grace that others have. Like, you want the grace that others have. I was like, ooh, like.
Yeah. I also have unbidden guests are often welcomest when they are gone.
Oh yeah, that was so funny. I also liked like when they're bringing, I forget like which traitor's body it is, like before Joan, and she's like, "Oh, I think it is him. Let them have his body, for if he were to stay, it would but stink and putrefy the air."
Yeah.
But also just like Joan's, like, I'm not gonna read the whole thing obviously, but like her whole end speech, and so like then her curse at the end that she leaves. Oh my god, I love the curse at the end. Let me find it. The first, okay, like I was like, how fucking long is this play? Please stand by.
Well, while you're finding it, I'll just say we watched Mulan.
Oh hell yeah!
For this month, and it was really good. It really stood up the test of time.
Unlike Aladdin.
It's very loosely similar story.
Yeah, I looked up some articles about like how they're viewed in like similar ways.
Because they are similar figures in like history / mythology.
Yeah, like the main difference is Joan of Arc was like for sure a real person, and Mulan is, to my understanding, viewed more like a Robin Hood type, like maybe in like King Arthur, like maybe she was real, maybe she wasn't, kind of thing.
Based on like vaguely based on someone or something like that.
Yeah, like that. Which, yeah, but I also had written down, like one of the differences was like both ruled armies and wore men's clothes, but Joan was not trying to hide her gender, but still like they both felt like had tragic things fall upon them when like at the cost of their gender. Like obviously when Mulan's gender is revealed in the movie, they like leave her to die. Obviously the difference is like Mulan wins in the end. Like she gets all these people to bow to her. I just love that movie. My favorite part is, and I told you I read like this whole like Tumblr post one time about like how brilliant this scene was in regards to gender performance, and it's the scene when she's on the roof with Attila the Hun, and he knocks her sword aside, and she reaches in her pockets, and all she and he says, "Out of ideas," and he goes and she catches his sword in the fan and flips it. She says, "Not quite." And I read this post that was like, this is brilliant because it's not that Mulan like completely was disconnected with the feminine ideas of her culture. It was that she also felt connected to the masculine ideas, and she gets to create and exist in like this perfect balance that no woman or man had gotten to do before. And like, she gets all the other guy soldiers to like dress in drag to be like distractions, and everyone climbing up. Obviously the Make a Man Out of You, a whole montage of her doing it, like
so good.
It gets me every time. It's so amazing.
It's so great.
Just like the look on her face when she shoots the arrow down at him from up there. Like, I did it. Obviously, the bisexual panic that Li Shang has is iconic.
And I think it's a good, like, very loose, like, similar story to Joan of Arc and everything, because, like, they are both women, like, fighting in this, like, masculine-dominated world. And there's just like a lot of similar themes that the themes that we said earlier, almost all of them could apply to Mulan as well.
Yeah.
Because they are very similar stories.
Like they hint in the beginning of the movie that Mulan is really good at strategy because she's
playing checkers or something.
Checkers game really well. And so then, like Joan of Arc is really good at strategy. And so it's interesting that they have like these parallels, and that, once again, I always think it's more interesting when we watch something that's more inspired by Shakespeare than a direct adaptation, because it shows how Shakespeare's themes and characters and stories constantly show up in media. And I find
how they kind of transcend the stories that they're in, like, I don't think any child would be like, oh yeah, let me pick up Henry VI part
Yeah.
1. But like you watch Mulan and you're like, this is a very similar story, and yet massive people are consuming it, similar to how so many people consumed it in Shakespeare's time.
I found the Joan of Arc, her curse that she leaves at the end when she knows they're going to kill them. Then lead me hence, with whom I leave my curse. May never glorious sun reflects his beams upon the country where you make abode, but darkness and the gloomy shade of death environ you till mischief and despair drive you to break your necks or hang yourselves. Like the idea, like if you kill me, then may your country fail. Like I love that. Was just until you break your necks or hang yourselves. Like Joan was like, I didn't come to fuck around with you guys. This is ridiculous.
Yeah. I think it's just, I think also like kind of going on like what we were saying before, I think it's interesting how like we have watched several Disney movies now or adaptations because they are like kind of loosely similar. And I think it's interesting because like Disney is so popular now, obviously, because they have such mass appeal. But like back in his day, Shakespeare had all this mass appeal, and kind of like going back to what we said at the start, how like the Henry plays really solidified his place in English literature and everything. Similarly, like these movies did the same thing for Disney. They like really solidified them like in our childhood and like in everyone's general consciousness.
We've been watching primarily Disney Renaissance films, like, you know, Little Mermaid, The Lion King, this. Like, obviously, we watch High School Musical, but the Disney Renaissance is what, like, Disney was going bankrupt. Like, they did not think they wanted animated movies anymore.
Similar to how Shakespeare was very poor.
Exactly. And so, like, the fact that, you know, the Disney Renaissance started in 89 with The Little Mermaid, and it was this huge box office success. And so they went on to make all these different choices, and like, you know, then Beauty and the Beast was a huge blockbuster, and then in the remake in 2017 they reference Romeo and Juliet like constantly in the remake. And you know, it's just interesting just to see all of the different things that Disney slid into. Like if you Google like Shakespeare and Disney, like all different stuff comes up of like little things, not even in these movies that were like obviously heavily inspired, but also just like little references in tons of Disney movies. And obviously Disney is something that like so many people know. Oh yeah, another Renaissance,
most popular media corporation now.
Yeah, today my sister got home from like this meeting for the beginning of the school year as a teacher, and for an icebreaker they had to do Disney trivia. And she's asking me all the questions, and I missed a few, but most of them I like hadn't. She was like, oh, this was the bonus question that nobody got right. And she was like, the guy who voiced Aladdin, what character did he play on Full House? And I was like, Steve. And my sister was like, are you serious? She's like, nobody else knew it. I was like, yeah, guys, amateur hour. I was like, that was DJ's boyfriend. Like, come on, guys. I thought we all knew this. Like, yeah, but Disney is a vibe from now. That's why, like, every time we had to do like a play that was somewhat boring, like a Henry, I was trying to be like, where can we get a Disney movie in here?
Right.
Well, and I told you, I was like on a date when this guy was like, I told him how we try to pick Disney movies sometimes, and I was like, oh yeah, so for Tempest we pick Little Mermaid. He was like, oh, so what's like other ones you could do? Probably like Henry VI could be Mulan. And I was like, explain to me how it could be Mulan. And he's like, you know, Joan of Arc. I was like, Joan of Arc is in Henry VI? He's like, yeah, in the first one. And I was like, okay. And then I text Bridget, I'm like, hey, so I just learned that we could do Mulan for Henry VI.
I was like, yeah, that sounds great.
It's literally the worst adaptation nights we have, not including like where we just watch random stage plays. Henry, like,
yeah,
like the people adapt them, and it's like, sure, like they all had like okay parts, but for the most part they were so fucking boring.
It's also just like they're so long.
You're so long. What?
No one is actively, unless they're like a scholar, seeking out a scholar.
They're like, oh boy, I would love
out like the
film of a dimly lit banquet hall full of white men talking about a war we will not see. It was the way that like when we watched The King, which was Henry V, it like the whole first like 40 minutes was just a previously on showing us what happened with Henry IV. And I was like, just reference it. Why are you showing it to me? Yeah. I already sat through Chimes at midnight. I know what happened. Okay. I knew so much more about the histories of like the fucking Henry Tudors than I ever intended to know. What I think is funny is there's no Henry VII. It just skips to Henry VIII.
Yeah.
Who gives a fuck?
He was so boring that that even Shakespeare was like, no, we can't make a film.
That was the first king to be the last. Like, they ended the Wars of the Roses because Elizabeth of York and Henry Tudor VII married, and that ended it. And like, I guess just so little happened that he was like,
Shakespeare was like, that's too boring. There's nothing going on there.
Fun fact:
there was enough going on for Henry IV to have 2 parts. Don't worry.
Yeah, for this to have 3, and then he was like, what I think is crazy though is that Henry VIII is one that only has 1 part, but I guess that's because Queen Elizabeth, I think, was still alive around when that came out, so he didn't want to like write a bunch of plays that like made her look bad. But it's crazy because I would argue that would be the one that could have the most fucking parts. This man killed killed 2 of his wives. It's like divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. Like,
yeah,
it's crazy where he decided that, like, I want to, like, what did Henry VI possibly do that we're getting 3 parts here?
Right?
Okay, the Wars of the Roses, I guess, but
the anticipation's really building up here.
I know. When I saw there was 3 parts, I was like, what the actual fuck?
The man is really out here.
He was like, I have a story to tell, and we're going to hear it. And it's like, do we need to, though?
Yeah.
What did you think about our reading? I know we talked about it a little, but, you know, we had 7 people to play over 40 characters.
It was good.
I think it was the best we'd done with having few people in that many, because we had all talked about beforehand how we had to just really commit to hats and voices. And my sister watched it, and she usually doesn't really get around to watching our Shakespeare stuff. And she said that she thought it was great. She was like, it was easy to follow. Like, you guys were making it very clear who you were playing. And
it was pretty easy to follow.
Yeah, and I rewatched it, and I was like, this is hilarious. Like, because I think when we do it, obviously we're being over the top because it's a Zoom screen and there's very few of us. Yeah. But I do, and maybe this is just like pretentious, but I do wish when you go see Shakespeare, I wish more of them would be goofier at times.
Yeah, sometimes they're like really, really serious. And
like, because it is meant to be funny. Like, I always think about like when we did Antony and Cleopatra and David was supposed to be a messenger and comes in and it's just like a message from Caesar, and Marcia's like, what? Like, I just, like, there's so many times where, like,
you could add a bit of comedy just to lighten it up a bit, and, like, a lot of them don't.
Well, and my thing is because people choose to set Shakespeare stuff in weird time periods anyway. Like, obviously, we're on Zoom, but we essentially are setting it out of time because there are times where, like, we're holding our phones or, like, doing completely modern things, and I think it being, like, chaotically anachronistic makes it funny. Like, again, when we did Antony and Cleopatra, when I was the messenger that Cleopatra Mar is like getting mad at and wants to kill, Summer like pretended she was going to film the whole thing on her phone, and it's just little things like that can make it so much funnier, because the point was that these were like over the top crazy like shows that people went to see, and so many people now when they do Shakespeare, even if it's a comedy, they still make it
super serious,
and everything is taken so seriously, and it's like, is that how Shakespeare would have wanted them done? Like, at the end of
you want it to be fun, and like because like it was made for like mass appeal and everything, and like I feel like taking it too seriously can hinder that, because no one wants to go and like be bored and like see.
Like, it was meant
to be drama, but like you want it to be fun and like interesting.
It was meant to be bawdy and over the top. Like, I always think about when we did like Macbeth, and like you're playing Macbeth and Mara comes in and she's like, oh, like, did you hear the tempest storms last night and the world was fervorous and did shake? And you're just like, it was a rough night. Like, it's just so funny because those are the words, but who's to say that someone wouldn't have had that tone of voice back then to say those words? And it's just, I wish, like, again, obviously some of our jokes are because it's Zoom. Like, when there's really specific lags and we're all supposed to be saying something in unison, like, obviously the way we come out of that is a joke. Like, when we did, like, Antony and Cleopatra, and everyone was like, good morrow, General. And I was just like, what up? And then my favorite is watching Maggie laugh every time I make a joke and shit, because she can't keep it together when people make it. So when we were, like, all supposed to be, like, saying all hail to my character, and I was just like, thank you, because everyone was like off key, and then like, you know, like, it's funny. I wish more people would, I guess, approach Shakespeare with the mentality of, you're doing a modern play, this is just how it's written, like, didactically.
And just to have more like fun with it. Like, because I feel like also like when you're doing Shakespeare, you kind of get bogged down with the language, because it's like, oh well, I have to focus and everything on this, and it's like, well, yeah, you do, but then like there's also the like acting part of it that should be interesting and fun.
Yeah, like one exercise in my acting class in college that our teacher had us do is we were doing he has almost subbed Why Hast Thou Left the Chamber from Macbeth, and we did it through with our partners, and he was like, everyone's too stiff, it's clear that you don't 100% understand all the words in the scene, what they mean. And so he had us sit down and go back through what are they actually saying. And then he had us do it again, and he said, first, before you do it again, improv the whole scene anachronistically, like talk colloquially, do the whole scene that way. And I was like, okay. And I was Lady Macbeth. And so when I left the room and when I come back in, I went, what the fuck are you doing? And like, because they're arguing like that. She's like, get your shit together. And so when you understand that like these were crazy, off the wall, volatile characters saying appropriate things and being bawdy and rude and violent, like people take Shakespeare too seriously because we view Shakespeare as like the epitome of like literary Oxfordian canon. And it's like, yes, he was a brilliant writer, and he was seen as a brilliant writer in his time, but he was seen as a brilliant writer the way like Spielberg's a brilliant director. Spielberg is still like this commercial director making us fun things. No one's going to say E.T. isn't this amazing film or Jurassic Park isn't this amazing film. But they're still
mass appeal.
Their mass appeal, and they still have their moments of goofiness and fun character moments. And so many times when I go see live Shakespeare, as someone who loves Shakespeare, I'm still bored because the way they're doing it is so boring. Everything is like this big dramatic announcement to the audience, and it's like, we know what you're doing. Just stop it. Like,
which is why also like I'm doing I Hate Shakespeare this fall, and I think that'll be really fun because it's like it's exactly what you were kind of saying about your acting class. Like it's taking all the modern elements that like a lot of people like, it's taking all of the elements from back then and putting them in the modern time and like kind of explaining them almost so to make it easier to comprehend. And like I think that's really fun.
That's why I think the musical Something Rotten is so funny. Because again, it's like this self-aware Shakespearean story. And that's the thing I think is at the end of the day, like so many times when people choose to set Shakespeare like in this other time period, like that weird Midsummer Night's Dream thing where they're like the bicycle has just been invented, and it's like the fuck does that have to do with this? And like you know, and then when we watched Michael Fassbender's Macbeth, like that was taking itself very seriously. Like it had its moments, but I was kind of like, all right, I need to
calm down.
We get it, which is why like it's fun to watch like modern things that are inspired by it, like High School Musical being
it's like, oh, I see all the different threads, but they're like you can understand it really easily.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, Romeo and Juliet was like this genre-bending story that was really funny and then really serious, but it's about dramatic teenagers. And so, you know, I would love to see, you know, like Mulan, like we were talking about when we watched it, is such, the tone shifts are so drastic and it works. Like they're singing like a girl worth fighting for and being all goofy, and then they stop at this war-ravaged village. Like it wasn't afraid to show you both. And even though it was just, it was covering this very real point in Chinese history that was just horrific, this like horrific war-ridden, war-ravaged time in history, it still wasn't taking every single moment so seriously. Like even in the beginning when she fails the matchmaker thing, that's a really serious thing that happened for her as a young woman. And they don't make that little. It's still clear that that's not good that happened, because, you know, it's followed by reflection, but it's still like, it's goofy when it needs to be. It's lighthearted when it needs to be. And I feel like so many people do Shakespeare now, whether it's on stage or they make like a direct movie adaptation, and either their choice to be different is just so fucking weird. Like we're in Japan and we're going to have a full musical number at the end, Kenneth Branagh, or it's all just one somber note. And it's like, we need a balance.
We need to mix it up a bit. Yeah. I agree.
Fun times. So should we talk about, do you have anything else to say?
Not really. I feel like we touched on most of it. Yeah.
Do you want to read your sonnet and then I'll talk about what we're doing next month?
Or do you want to talk about next month, and I'll read the sonnet?
Okay, so next month we're reading The Merry Wives of Windsor, which I'm excited. I've never read this one. I've read parts. I've never read it, and I've heard it's hilarious, and there's a lot of women characters in it. I didn't read the whole script yet, but I went through parts of it, and there's so many women. And it's basically like, I know it's very much like a miscommunication, comedy of errors type story, which I'm excited about. And we will be doing our live reading on September 10th at 9 p.m. EST on this channel. And then for our movie, we're watching, hold on, let me pull this up. Where is it? Monthly schedule. Should have had this up like a prepared person. Okay. For this one, we are watching a direct adaptation, the 1965 version. But that is considered one of like the highest rated ones. Movie night will be the week of the 13th. It depends what day. We don't know yet.
We'll let you know on Twitter.
Follow us Twitter at @bard_book and on Instagram, because that's where we post like fun facts about the plays and the history, and have polls and keep everyone updated on when we're doing things. And then the 24th at 8 p.m. EST on this channel will be our discussion for The Merry Wives of Windsor. And just remember, you can read the plays for free online. So
they're all free. Yeah, you can pull it up and you can have our live stream going if you want.
Yeah, we always. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching.
Thanks for watching. Here is sonnet number 2. When 40 winters shall besiege thy brow, and dig deep trenches in thy beauty's field, thy youth's proud livery, so gazed on now, will be a tattered weed, of small worth held. Then being asked where all thy beauty lies, where all the treasure of thy lusty days, to say within thine own deep sunken eyes, were an all-eating shame and thriftless praise. How much more praise deserved thy beauty's use, if thou couldst answer, this fair child of mine shall sum my count and make my old excuse, proving his beauty by succession thine. This were to be new made when thou art old, and see thy blood warm when thou feelest it cold.
I love that.
Yeah.
Just remember, guys, Shakespeare was smart.
He was smart.
So that's it. We will see you next month.
Bye.